Hello, today we are going to talk about the Shadow Walkers. So, this is a book that my husband, his coworker, wrote and gave to him. I believe you can find this book on Amazon. I think he self-published it. It's definitely not bad. Like, kudos to you for writing a book. I have yet to do that. That is a goal. And way to get it out there. So, doing this critique, I will be real, but I do think that that is awesome that you wrote a book. Like anyone who writes a book, even if I don't like it, somebody out there is going to like it. I will say, I don't love the pacing of the story. It seems very weird. So it's one of those stories where there's always an obstacle thrown at you, but then it's resolved within like 5 minutes. So one obstacle is that they're in the jungle and this black mamba is chasing them. And then just when you think the black mamba is going to bite the guy, it just decides not to. So it turns around and it leaves. And there's like this build up and it starts to get intense because you're like, oh my gosh, like, is he going to be okay? Like, what's going to happen? And I thought maybe because the guy that's being chased, throws a rock on its head, and I thought maybe that was like what deters it, but it still goes after him. But then at the last second it's like, actually never mind. And this book does that a lot. So there's another part too where the main character, he's having a vision like dream of what happened to his wife when she went missing. And just when you think like things are going to be really bad for the wife, she magically gets saved. And it's like, okay, I guess. I just don't love that. Like, throw out the conflict if you are going to use it. But, like, don't throw it out and then be like, oh, but actually, it fixed itself. It's all good now. So I didn't love that. I also, truthfully, I find this book kind of boring. And I was so bummed. So when I read the title Shadow Walkers and you read that it's about like a Native American tribe, I was thinking werewolves. And maybe there is a difference and I just didn't realize that. But I've heard the term Shadow Walkers and I thought it was kind of the same as skinwalkers. And like they can transform into different animals, but like typically it's werewolf kind of vibes. But that's not the case with this. Like they truly all transform into different animals, kind of. And so it was a little like I was so hoping for werewolves and then I didn't get werewolves and it was fine. But then the whole transforming thing is like so not a big part of this story. And like it's so interesting and you could have made it so much more of this story. Like with his wife the main character Travis, his wife goes missing. And it could have been that like she became a shadow walker or something, or like they taught her how to shadow walk. But she's just asleep. And it's like, okay, I guess. And like the shadow walkers really only are in this story like 3 times. And that's it. And I would just think that because like they're a big deal, like they would like you would see them more transforming into their other forms, but it's only like 3 times. And so mildly disappointing. I will say you can tell that this author is very LDS and that's fine. But like there's certain parallels in this book that I was like, oh man, that reminds me of back when I was raised Mormon. Like that reminds me of certain things you learn in the church. So it's just interesting. So one of the parallels, the wife, when she goes missing, she like ends up sleeping and she's just stuck in this sleeping state, like waiting to be awoken, but she can't be awoken until basically like she knows the truth and she comes to terms with it, which just kind of feels like when they talk to you about how everybody's going to be stuck at like paradise and they can't move on to any of the realms until they accept the truth. So that was interesting. And there's a couple other parallels where it's like, oh, yeah, like I can kind of see that you have some Mormon beliefs. I will say, you would think that a book about twins, like fraternal twins, who both kind of have these like special abilities would be more interesting. And it was really, I don't know. It was just kind of a bummer that like their special abilities were so very clearly only there to help move the plot along. Like I don't love that. I don't know. But for the most part, it's a fine book. I'm not going to read it again because I really like it's readable. You can read it and it's fine. But like I just didn't really enjoy it. And another thing that I didn't really love is the way the author describes the two women that like you're supposed to know are very attractive. Like it was so weird and it feels kind of like gross and misogynistic and like also maybe a tad racist. I don't know, like maybe I'm looking into things a little too much, but Tony, that's the twin. So that's one of the main characters. She is described as blonde, athletic, fit, and long legs, and her body is very proportionate. So she has a good shape that's proportional. That's like how he describes her. And okay, I guess it reads creepy. And Tony gets hired on the spot for this like high-tech company. But like the owner of the company wanted to hire Tony immediately based on her looks. Just on her looks. He was like, "Oh, I need her to work with me. If only she knew about computers." And then he's like flabbergasted when Tony's super super smart and can do a lot of tech stuff. Like Tony's able to make this device where you wear a necklace and you can just talk to somebody as long as you know what they look like and you can picture them in your mind. You can pull them up and you can talk to them and you can show them your surroundings and you're like talking through your mind but also the crystal. So it's like, okay. And that should be interesting, but then like the author uses a lot of code verbiage. So like you can tell, because my husband worked with him coding, and you can tell that he's a coder. Because there were parts where I was like, I kind of know a little bit, but he throws like all of these words at you and these terms from coding, but then doesn't explain them. So you're like, oh yes, yes, Python, Jarvis, yeah, yeah, okay. And he does it a lot. And it's a little like, okay, I don't know what that means to me, but sounds good. So I wish he could have like broken it down or something, because I was like, I don't know what this is supposed to mean. Like obviously I can read the coding name and realize that it's a code, but like after that I'm like, I don't know what that does for me. So Tony sounded very smart and it sounded like she was doing something, but I could not understand it. And I just feel like unless you're a coder and you're Mormon, you probably won't like this book because coding comes into it a bit. It's not like a ton, but it comes in enough that you're like, I don't, okay, cool. But another thing that I didn't really love, again, with one of the female characters, is the way she is described. So she's one of the Native American characters, but she's very pale. Like she's the lightest skinned Native American. And she's blonde hair, kind of. And it's blonde and it's like not as curly as the other Native Americans. Like, it's not the same texture, is what it sounded like. And she's also very tall, very athletic looking, and very proportional. And it's like, what does that even mean? Like, but like, you know that she's the daughter of the chief, but it really seems like the only reason that she's described as attractive is because she looks kind of white passing. I don't know. It felt weird. And I was like, I don't really know if I love the way you describe women because it seems really weird. And it doesn't really do anything because the whole point of the guy meeting Kara is like, he's like, I feel this connection. I feel like we've met before. And he did not need to describe Kara's beauty at all the way he did, or like really at all. She could have just showed him that they had met before because Kara's a shadow walker. She was the Black Mamba. And so when he's like, oh, I feel like we've met before, she's like, yeah, we did. But I don't know. I just don't like the way that this author describes women. It was not my favorite. And I feel like for the most part, this book is kind of a slow burn. And ending, like, it's a nice ending. A lot of the people are okay. Like, almost everybody ends up together. And, like, even if they lost their family, they end up with a secondary family during the end of times. Because, of course, there's end of times. And it's fine. Like, that's sweet. That's wholesome. Like, I'm glad that the characters are happy. But for the most part, I don't think this book really did much for me. It wasn't a very interesting story, and I don't feel like it's written the best. Again, kudos to this guy for writing. Like, I'm sure as he keeps writing, his stories will get better, but I also think that he's not an author that I'll probably keep exploring because, I don't know, like, I've read a couple authors like this. I even know an author like this, and they seem very stuck in their ways of like, this is what I'm going to write, and I will only push the envelope this much, and that's all I want. And like, these books are for a very niche audience who has my same views and values, and that's totally fine. If that's who you want to write to, be my guest. It just wasn't for me.